We are back again with On the Moneyline, a podcast by MMAPlay365. I'm your host Newsome, and we're here to talk about UFC Vegas 11 at the Apex in Vegas. We have a well overdue but amazing main event this week that has a spicy background story too. We have Covington versus Woodley. Now there are a few interesting points to make here. Firstly, Covington and Woodley are ex-training partners, and when Woodley left ATT there was always animosity between the two fighters, with both of them claiming that they used to dominate the other during training sessions. But if you think it couldn't get any more interesting, Woodley has brought in Jorge Masvidal to help him prepare for Covington. Now, not only is Masvidal also an ex-training partner of Covington's, but these two guys were very close friends for many, many years until they fell out not too long ago. I'm excited. There's a press conference on Thursday as well, so let's hope that brings some heat. But just before we get into the breakdowns, last Saturday was a great event for MMAPlay365, and it was the first event in a long time where we didn't lose any of our fighters that were associated with the Dog of the Week, the recommended bets, the official bets, or the Fun Gamblers section either. So everything went to plan. The Dog of the Week was Otman Azaitar, who knocked Karma Worthy out in round one. Azaitar was also an official bet. We also cashed that dog money on Michelle Waterson too. We did fall short on Alan Patrick with one unit at plus 230, but overall we finished on a plus 3.3 unit profit with 66% return on investment. Our Fun Gamblers also cashed a nice 4-1 parlay too, with a lot of the parlay pieces winning in the create your own section as well. Remember, we have multiple packages on the MMAPlay365 website with UFC betting advice and daily fantasy sports content for DraftKings and FanDuel too. We also have various subscription lengths and options as well. So to see our full service list, please go and visit MMAPlay365.com for more information or to sign up today. And let's go. Let's break down some fights in the main event of the evening. We've got Colby Covington versus Tyron Woodley. Covington is currently the minus 360 favourite. The comeback on Woodley at plus 300 as the underdog. As for where the value is in this betting line, I do think that we've still got some slight value on Colby Covington, if I'm being honest. I think it's a great stylistic matchup for him, if I'm honest. Couple that with the decline of Tyron Woodley, I do think that Covington should be a bigger favourite in this spot. As for where the line moves, I do think we are going to see it hit minus 400, potentially even wider than that as well. It has been in that region already. Money came back in on Woodley, but it seems to be going back the other way again now, which I agree with. Now, as for how this fight plays out, first of all, we've got to talk about Tyron Woodley because there is an obvious decline in this guy. For the first time in his illustrious MMA career, he's coming into this fight coming off back-to-back losses. Obviously, last time out against Gilbert Burns, and then when he lost his title against Kamaru Usman. And honestly, I'm really not sure what Woodley's got left to give right now, especially at this level, fighting at the top of the division. And I think this is a huge problem for him, because against Gilbert Burns, he was very flat. He lacked any explosiveness. He was being pushed back to the cage, which I know Woodley is known to do in his fights. He is able to be pushed back to the cage, but against Gilbert Burns, it just looked a little different. The performance was just really, really bad. And it looked mentally as well, like whether his confidence wasn't there or whether a couple of minutes into the fight, he just didn't want to be in there. I'm not too sure, but I don't think that Tyron Woodley is doing himself any favours by constantly keep coming back to these guys that are the top of the division, the surging guys that are potential future champions like Gilbert Burns, for example. I think Woodley would be better served fighting somebody like Robbie Lawler, for example, or maybe a Neil Magny, just somebody that's not in that top five of the division. Colby Covington is at the top of the division. He is one of the welterweight elites at the minute. So Woodley's lost against the current champion in Usman. Then he lost against the number one contender who's going to be fighting Usman for the belt. And now he's fighting Covington. And those three guys are in the same bracket in the welterweight division, in my opinion. Now, I have mentioned that this fight stylistically favours Colby Covington, and it favours him for a lot of reasons, in my opinion. Obviously, the wrestling is a big thing. He's not going to get taken down by Tyron Woodley, or if Woodley does manage to shoot a takedown and get him down, it won't be anything significant. Colby will get back up to his feet. But there's a good chance that Colby could take Woodley down. Now, Colby didn't shoot a takedown against Usman, and vice versa as well. When those two fought, the wrestling was definitely nullified. But Burns took Woodley down. Usman took Woodley down. I think Colby can take Woodley down if he wants to as well. But the thing is in this fight, and this is where I think stylistically it is going to be a nightmare for Woodley, is because Colby doesn't have to rely on that wrestling to beat Woodley. I don't think he's as technical as Woodley when it comes to striking. I don't think he's as sharp as a striker. But what Colby will do is he'll throw in volume. In a 5-round fight, Colby can put up 140 or 150 strikes, no problem. Against Robbie Lawler, he threw over 400 strikes, which is just crazy numbers. So although Colby striking isn't as technical, isn't as dangerous as what Tyron Woodley is, just the sheer numbers in volume is just way too much for Woodley to handle, in my opinion. The judges aren't looking for technique, they're looking for strikes landed, and that's what Colby's going to give you with his pace and his pressure. And this leads me directly onto his cardio. I think Colby's up there with the best gas tank, not only in the UFC, but in the world of MMA. And again, Woodley's always had those question marks hanging over his gas tank. His volume is affected by that as well. He doesn't throw anywhere near as much as what he should, and we think that that might be because of the suspect gas tank. The same with the wrestling as well. We think that Woodley potentially doesn't shoot as many takedowns as what he should, given his wrestling credentials, because of the gas tank. I just think when you look at this fight all over, I think Colby's going to put a pace and pressure on Woodley that he's going to struggle to keep up with. I think Colby is going to significantly outland Woodley over 5 rounds, should it go 5 rounds, which I'm anticipating that it does. And I think even if push comes to shove, when we look at the wrestling, I think Colby's the better wrestler and he's the fighter that's more likely to land takedowns in this fight. And then, like I say, the cardio as well, it's just going to allow Colby to keep pushing a frantic pace for as long as this fight goes on. Woodley's path to victory here: catch Colby coming in with a counter, with that right hand, knock him out. But Colby's durable, man. Like, you look at the Usman fight, it took Usman to break his jaw to put Colby away, and he didn't even put him away straight away after he broke his jaw. So I don't think that it's going to be that easy for Woodley just to one-bomb Colby and put him out. I think Colby's more durable than that. Colby's also not a guy that's going to recklessly come in and be asking to be countered either. Like I say, that's his path to victory for Woodley in regards to landing that punch, hurting Covington, potentially finishing him. Outside of that, Woodley will get outstruck. He'll get significantly outlanded on the numbers of volume. He's probably going to get taken down. I just don't see an area where Woodley can dominate Covington for at least 3 rounds of this 5 if he doesn't knock him out. So I'm picking Colby Covington to win the fight. And in the next fight in the co-main event, we've got an absolutely electric one here. We've got Donald Cowboy Cerrone versus Niko Price. Niko Price currently the minus 155 favourite. The comeback on Cerrone at plus 135 as the underdog. Now, as for where the value is in this betting line, I do think that there's minimal value in Niko Price's line at minus 155. Although I do feel the line is quite fair at the same time as well. So I don't think there's a tremendous amount of value, but I do think that Price is playable at that betting line. Now, as for where the line moves come fight night, I do think we're going to see a little fluctuation in here because Cowboy is a fighter that is loved, he's a fighter that still has that name value for the casual fan base. So I do see some money coming back in on Cowboy for sure, but if this gets low enough that Niko Price is minus 135, minus 140, I think that'll steam back up to minus 150 without any issues. So ultimately, I think it's going to close roughly where we're at right about now. Now, as for how this fight plays out, it's really interesting because for Cowboy, his last fight against Pettis was very underwhelming. It was a fight that I actually thought that he'd won, if I'm being honest. And if it wasn't for that eye poke that the referee missed in round 3, I do think that Cowboy would have won on the scorecards. It's just the referee didn't see it, therefore the judges can't take it into consideration, and it looked like Pettis was really pouring it on Cowboy when really the fight should have had a timeout. But it wasn't Cowboy's night on the night. Regardless of that though, I think Pettis is quite declined as a fighter as well. So the fact that Cowboy had a competitive fight with Pettis definitely gives me concerns here, especially when you've got a guy like Niko Price that is going to war with Luque. That fight was very close before the fight was stopped due to Niko Price's eye closing up. And when you compare the last fight of either guys, Cerrone against Pettis, Price against Luque, there's a real difference in performance. Niko Price was aggressive. He landed over 100 strikes on Luque. He took hard shots. He gave hard shots. He beat up the leg. He was beating up the face of Luque as well. it was actually a really good performance from Price. It's a little unfortunate that the fight was stopped due to that eye closing up. And then when you look at Cerrone's performance, it was a little lackluster. It was competitive again with a fighter who I believe is declined, so it's not a good look for Cerrone. I think Niko Price can have success in this fight by pushing forward. I think he's going to be able to eat all of the strikes that Cowboy is going to throw at him. He'll get busted up for sure, but if he's eating strikes to come through into boxing range against Cowboy, then Price is going to land some hard shots on him, and I'm just not sure if Cowboy can take that aggression, forward pressure, and the power that Niko Price is going to bring behind those shots as well. The one thing I will say for Cowboy, and I think this must be in his game plan, is against Pettis, Cowboy did try and shoot quite a few takedowns. He was successful with a couple. The ones that he did take Pettis down with, he was able to spend a little bit of time on top as well. And although Pettis is declined as a fighter, he's still got those defensive wrestling and grappling abilities for sure. And those abilities are greater than those of Niko Price's. So if Cerrone's taking Pettis down and being able to hold him down and work on him for a little bit, I think that he's going to be able to do that to Niko Price and then some. I think he'll be able to take Niko Price down. And if he does take him down and spend some time on top, then Price is liable to getting submitted by Cerrone. That's Cerrone's path to victory for me. And that is a concern in this fight. It's not one of those puncher's chance paths to victories. It's a legit path to victory for Cowboy. So if he does come in here and he looks to take Niko Price down off the bat, you could get him out of there really with the submission. He's that much better than Price on the mat. But ultimately, Price doesn't have the worst takedown defense. The biggest problem is it's if the fight hits the mat and if Price is on his back, the fight's got to get there first. I think Price might be able to shrug off an early takedown or two. And I think if he can do that, he's going to be able to push forward against Cerrone. And I think he'll beat Cerrone up and down the body with leg kicks, with punches, that aggression, that forward pressure. I'm not sure if Cowboy will be able to handle that. I think he might crumble against Price with just how relentless he is with that aggression. I personally don't think Cerrone is just going to steamroll through Price with wrestling and grappling. Price is going to have success in this fight. And with that success, we should see Price putting Cowboy away. So I'm picking Niko Price to win this fight. And in the next fight, we welcome back the most hyped fighter in the world of MMA right now. We've got Boars Khamzat Chimaev versus Gerald Meerschaert. Chimaev currently the minus 380 favourite. The comeback on Meerschaert at plus 315 as the underdog. As for where the value is in this betting line, it opened minus 500, minus 550 for Khamzat Chimaev. It's dropped down a bit. I think it's playable. I still think there's value on Chimaev for sure. And listen, I know a lot of things about Chimaev that people don't. I think that this is a good fight for him. As for where the line moves, I'm surprised it's dropped from minus 500 to minus 380, if I'm being honest. I can see it heading back up the other way. I think it'll close minus 400, minus 450. I do think a large majority of the public feel that Meerschaert is being disrespected here, so I could see money coming in on Meerschaert as we progress through fight week, but I don't think it's going to be enough to really drastically affect the betting line. As for how this fight plays out, as I've already mentioned, I think this is a good fight for Chimaev here. I said the last time I broke the fight down that I first heard about Chimaev whilst I was in Sweden at UFC Stockholm in July 2019. I was told about this up-and-coming prospect to watch out for. Obviously, this has come to fruition. Ironically, I was in Stockholm again just a few weeks ago. I was having a chat again with the owner of the All Stars gym. You know, we've got a good relationship. He was talking a lot about Chimaev, telling me what he's like in the gym, how he was preparing for those two fights that he had back to back not so long ago, his skills, his qualities, his mental state. He was talking to me about a whole host of things that obviously I'm not going to talk about on this podcast. And then on one of the days we were talking, Khamzat even joined us, sat next to me, we were having a chat, you know. Like I say, I found out a lot about this guy as a fighter, and it's just really good information about a fighter that people won't be able to find on the internet. But back to the fight, I do think that Meerschaert is going to be more competitive than Rhys McKee and John Phillips for sure. But ultimately, I don't think the outcome is going to be any different. Meerschaert does have tricky jiu-jitsu, so if Chimaev does take Meerschaert down, which I expect him to do, Chimaev does have to mind his P's and Q's on the mat. Meerschaert does have good sweeps, especially from mount. if Chimaev's in guard, then Meerschaert will throw up arm bars, he'll look for triangles, he'll look to submit him off his back, but Chimaev's takedowns don't really land him in guard. And if Meerschaert does work back to the guard from a more advanced position of Chimaev, then Chimaev will just pass guard again. He doesn't really sit in there. So that submission threat off Meerschaert's back isn't that much of a concern for me. The biggest concern would be Chimaev being swept and put on his back. But then I think the wrestling will allow Chimaev to get back up to his feet. We saw Trevin Giles sweep Meerschaert a few times. So I feel that even though Meerschaert is tricky on the mat, he's not a complete master down there. If he's on top, you can find your way back up to your feet, or you can find a sweep or reversal. And then the fight that I keep going back to is the Jack Hermansson fight. Hermansson took Meerschaert down and absolutely smashed him with ground and pound on the mat. And this is what I mean. Meerschaert isn't an out-and-out specialist in regards to Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu down there. He's not a guy that when you go down there, you're probably not going to last much longer. That type of fight is Damian Maia, which is very interesting, and hopefully we'll be talking about that in a couple of weeks' time, because the UFC have double booked Chimaev, and if he beats Gerald Meerschaert, he's going to go on to fight Damian Maia, which is a great fight that, again, we'll talk about sometime in the future, hopefully. But as for this fight, I think that Chimaev isn't an expert on the feet in regards to his striking, but when you look at the striking qualities of both fighters, I think Meerschaert's quite rigid, he's quite stiff in the striking. I think Khamzat Chimaev is a better striker. And then when it comes to the wrestling, Chimaev is definitely the better wrestler. I think he's going to be heavier on top. I think he's going to stay out the way of any submissions from bottom. I'm not totally convinced that Meerschaert sweeps him, but if he does, I don't think that's going to put Chimaev in too much danger. I think he'll be able to get out of those positions as well. When you look at the bigger picture of this fight, sure, Meerschaert does have a path to victory with a submission, but ultimately I just don't think it's going to come. I think Chimaev's going to be better everywhere in this fight. I think the hype on Chimaev is something that reminds me of the hype that Conor McGregor got, but even Conor McGregor didn't get a double fight booking. I think the hype's real. I think Chimaev beats Meerschaert, gets a really good name on his record, moves on to Maia, and we'll see how that fight goes there. But for this fight, on Saturday night, I'm picking Khamzat Chimaev to win the fight. And in the next fight, talking about hype trains, we've got one here that is absolutely derailed. We've got Johnny Walker versus Ryan Spann. Johnny Walker is currently the minus 125 favourite. The comeback on Ryan Spann at plus 105 as the underdog. I'm not too sure how much value is in this fight, but I do think that if you're going to be playing any side, then Johnny Walker's probably the right side to play. The reason why I'm not sure if there's too much value is purely because Johnny Walker has just looked very underwhelming in his last two fights. He got beat by Krylov. Even the judges tried to give him that win, but it wasn't to be. The fight before that, getting knocked out by Corey Anderson, who is no longer in the UFC due to him going over to Bellator. So those two losses for me really don't look good for Walker at all. But having said that, I do think Walker is the right side to play here. As for where the line moves, at minus 125, I could see a bit of money coming back in on Walker. I don't know how much though, but if it does get to minus 135, minus 140, even minus 150, I think people will then start visiting the other side and playing Ryan Spann as a good plus money underdog. Now, as for how this fight plays out, I spoke about a derailed hype train. That was obviously Johnny Walker. I admittedly was on that hype train as well. I still think that Walker is super athletic. I think he's got crazy, insane power. I just think he needs to rein that ego in a little bit. I think he needs to stop bouncing around from gym to gym and just stick to one place where he feels comfortable, where he can grow and develop as a fighter. Changing camp, changing gym for every single fight is just not the right thing to do, in my opinion. But the qualities are there for Walker. It's just he needs to develop and he needs to settle down a little bit. That's all it is. Interestingly, for this fight, he's been a lot quieter. We've not heard too much from him. The hype's gone, so people aren't going crazy about it's Johnny Walker fight week anymore. I think that's going to do him good in this fight. And listen, we haven't even spoke about Ryan Spann yet. Ryan Spann's last performance against Sam Alvey, a fighter that I think if you're a good fighter in this division, Sam Alvey is a type of fighter that you should absolutely be beating. And Ryan Spann did beat him. He had a good first round against him, but Ryan Spann gassed, and that fight went to a split decision. Ryan Spann could have lost that fight. If the judges read Sam Alvey's name out and the referee lifted Alvey's arm, nobody would have complained. It wouldn't have been a robbery. It was one of those fights where it went to the decision, and I honestly didn't know which way it was going to be scored. So for me, that's not a good look either, even though Ryan Spann won the fight. I'm just not sure in this fight that Ryan Spann is going to have the tools to definitively beat Johnny Walker. Sure, he could catch him, just like any fighter could catch their opponent, especially at light heavyweight. It's one of the heavier divisions, so one clean punch can end the night for sure. But you look at what Krylov did against Johnny Walker. Krylov took Walker down. He laid on top of him, heavy, landing strikes, getting that control time in. And Ryan Spann does have okay wrestling, and he does have a submission game as well. But Johnny Walker was able to sweep Krylov a couple of times and make that fight closer, at least in one of the judges' eyes anyway. And I don't think Ryan Spann has got that wrestling and that grappling that Krylov's got. Spann might try and take him down, but I'm not too sure how successful he'll be. I think he's probably going to have more success on the feet, try to land that shot that puts Walker out, and he might do it. But I think Walker's explosiveness, I think his aggressiveness coming forward, his athleticism, I think he's going to be able to find openings through the guard of Ryan Spann, specifically straight down the middle. I think the straight punches, I think a flying knee is potentially there as well, or even just clinching up with Spann and landing an elbow. We saw Carl Roberson a few years ago knock Ryan Spann out as Ryan Spann went in for a takedown. Roberson elbowed him in the side of the head and put him out. So I think those sort of tools for Walker are going to be effective in this fight. I think Walker is going to be able to explode into some power strikes. If this fight does go late, so if Walker doesn't knock him out early, or if Spann doesn't knock Walker out early, it's not a case of, oh, well, Spann's definitely going to win them, because Spann faded against Sam Alvey, who is a fighter that's definitely not known for putting a fast, high-pressure pace on a fight. So if he's fading against Alvey, I don't trust that sort of gas tank, if I'm being honest. It's not a clear-cut decision for Spann if it gets out of the first round. I think the fight's going to be competitive for 3 rounds should it go there, but I do think that Walker can land something on Spann and put him out. I'm picking Johnny Walker to win this fight. And in the next fight, again, we can talk about hype trains. We've got Mackenzie Dern versus Randa Markos. Dern is currently a minus 165 favourite. The comeback on Markos at plus 145 as the underdog. I think the value is with the underdog in this fight with Randa Markos. I just don't think the line should be this wide at all for reasons that I'll talk about very shortly. Specifically with how Dern needs to win this fight. I think the line should be much closer. I've got no problems with Mackenzie Dern being favoured. She's an absolute specialist in what she does on the mat with the jiu-jitsu. But to be a minus 165 favourite against Markos, I just don't agree with it. As for where the line moves, it has been fluctuating a bit. Dern was a bigger favourite a couple of days ago. The line has come down to minus 165. I think we'll see fluctuation for sure coming through fight week and leading on to fight night. I think it'll probably close with Dern as a minus 150 favourite, something around that region. As for how this fight plays out, again, I spoke about hype trains. Mackenzie Dern had a lot of hype in the UFC. I don't think it's completely gone. I still think she's got some hype, but it's definitely not as great as what it was a few fights ago. Dern is a specialist in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. She's a high-level black belt, ADCC World Champion, ADCC North American Champion, World Jiu-Jitsu Champion, No-Gi World Jiu-Jitsu Champion, Pan Jiu-Jitsu Champion, European Champion, Brazilian National Champion, Asian Open Champion, World Cup Champion. This woman reigns gold medals when it comes to Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. But the problem that I've got with Dern, bear in mind I love Mackenzie Dern, I've bet her a few times in the UFC, I really like her style and her qualities, like I say, just absolutely shine when she hits the mat. But the problem I've got is the wrestling. I honestly thought in her last 2 fights, that's an area that she really lacked, but it's an area that she really needs. She needs to improve this wrestling, because if she can't get fights down to the mat, she is going to struggle to win easily. Her striking's developing, that's improving. She can hang on the feet for sure. But if she reaches the top of the division, then she's going to need to get fights to the mat and use her jiu-jitsu to beat the best women in the division. And this is the problem. In her last loss against Amanda Ribas, she was unable to take her down. Looking at that in hindsight, though, Ribas is going to be a phenomenal fighter in the UFC. She's getting better and better, so I didn't really hold too much against Dern for that. But then against Hannah Cyphers, She was struggling to take Cyphers down early. She was getting the body lock. She couldn't put her down. Cyphers was able to exit, escape, get back into space. And at this point, I'm starting to get very concerned for Mackenzie Dern because Hannah Cyphers has proven to be quite easy to take down. So the fact that Dern couldn't do it is very alarming. Dern did submit to that fight, but that was because there was a scramble. Dern ended up on her back and Hannah Cyphers engaged just a little bit enough for Dern to grab a hold of the leg and then she submitted her. Without that, it would have been a much closer fight, a much sketchier fight. And this is where we come into Randa Markos because Markos is a fighter that can wrestle much better than Hannah Cyphers for sure. Whether it be offensively or defensively, specifically defensively will help her in this fight. But most importantly for Markos is she's the one with better striking in this fight. She's been developing her striking as well. Again, she came into the UFC, a little bit of a grinder, a little bit of a wrestler, liked to lay and pray, run the clock down, win rounds, win decisions. But like I say, she has been improving that boxing technique. She has been looking sharper lately. If Dern can't get this fight to the mat, then Markos is going to piece her up on her feet. She might even finish it. That wouldn't shock me. But if not, she'll win a decision comfortably, no problem. The problem is for me, pretty much every single Dern fight hits the mat at some point. Pretty much every single Markos fight hits the mat at some point. So that leads me to believe in this fight, it's going to hit the mat at some point. Who's going to be the aggressor there? Who's going to be the one shooting takedowns? I'd be very surprised if that's Markos, but I do think the fight is going to hit the mat. And honestly, Mackenzie Dern is just levels above where Markos is at with the jiu-jitsu. I think if it hits the mat with 30 seconds, 60 seconds, 90 seconds to work, I think Markos is in very big trouble. So for that reason, with me believing that the fight will hit the mat at some point, I'm picking Mackenzie Dern to win the fight. And in the next fight, we've got two fighters that have been putting in their hard work and remaining active during lockdown. We've got Kevin Holland versus Darren Stewart. Kevin Holland is currently the minus 255 favourite. The comeback on Stewart at plus 215 as the underdog. As for where the value is in this fight, I do think it sits with Kevin Holland. When you really analyse and break this fight down, the paths to victory for Stewart are quite minimal. The window of opportunity is very small as well. So I just think that Stewart winning this fight is a low percentage outcome, and I do think Kevin Holland should be a bigger favourite, if I'm being honest. As for where the line moves, I do think the betting line on Kevin Holland will get wider. It wouldn't shock me to see him close at minus 300 or roughly around that sort of price. That's ultimately where I see the line closing. As for how this fight plays out, when you look at the striking of Kevin Holland, I think his physique helps as well with him being so tall. He's got big advantages in his height, his reach, his leg reach, and that alone is going to cause someone like Darren Stewart problems. But then when you look at the striking qualities of Holland, he really mixes it up really well. He's got good hands, sharp hands, straight punches, throws in volume. He's got an unorthodox style of movement inside the cage. He's elusive. And to add to all that, he'll throw kicks as well down the middle. He'll throw spin kicks. Again, just an unorthodox style of attack. But he mixes it up nicely and it works for him. And moving off from his striking, his wrestling's decent. His grappling's decent. People might assume that Holland is just this elusive striker, but he's very, very well-rounded and he's good wherever the fight goes. He's got good cardio. He can go 3 rounds at absolutely no problem at a high pace. He's durable. You look at his last fight, he was getting clipped with some hard shots, and I've seen him get clipped with hard shots throughout his career. And some of these shots you're expecting to see him wobble or a little bit dazed or even dropped, and he just doesn't. He just eats these shots so well, and that durability and the cardio really gels with his overall game and makes him a complete fighter. You look at Darren Stewart, I like Darren Stewart as a fighter, but one thing that I always say about Darren Stewart fights, and go back and listen to the previous podcasts, I say this every time, the dude gets backed up to the cage way too often. He allows fighters to be the aggressor. And yes, he's got hard counters. Yes, he can throw hard punches back, but against Kevin Holland, Holland will stick on the outside if he needs to, but if he can push you back to the cage, he'll either get in close, tie up with your throw short elbows. If he doesn't want to tie up, he'll shoot a takedown. But one of Holland's biggest strengths, and something that I think will really help him in this fight, win comfortably at least, is being able to pin his opponent back to the cage, but then keeping his distance so he's the one controlling the range. So the opponent's back will be against the cage, but he'll be at kicking range and he'll be coming in as and when he pleases, sliding in and out of that range. If he does that against Darren Stewart, I just don't see a path for Darren Stewart to win this fight unless he lands one of those hard counters. That's possible, but again, I've seen Holland hit hard a number of times and he never really looks too fazed by it. Obviously, he doesn't want to be relying on that here because at some point, if he does keep getting hit hard in the face, one of them will put him out. I just think that, like I say, that window of opportunity for Darren Stewart to knock Holland out is very small. The likelihood of it happening is also not great, in my opinion. I think Holland should have a relatively comfortable fight here. I think Stewart will have some success in this fight. I don't think it's going to be a whitewash. He will have his moments for sure, but ultimately, I think the skill set and the qualities are in the favour of Holland. The physique advantages are in the favour of Holland. I think Holland's got more paths to victory. And overall, stylistically, I think the fight favours Holland. So I'm picking Kevin Holland to win this fight. And in the next fight, we've got Mayra Bueno Silva versus Mayra Romero Borella. Silva is currently the minus 245 favourite. The comeback on Borella at plus 205 as the underdog. Now, as for where the value is in this fight, I do think that the value sits with Silva. She is the rightful favourite in this fight. I do think Borella can cause some problems, which I'll touch upon very shortly, but overall, I think that Silva gets the job done. She's definitely developing from fight to fight. Borella, I'm not totally convinced is UFC caliber. We'll see after this fight. So, yeah, for me, the value is on Silva. As for where the line moves, I do think we'll see some fluctuation, just a little bit, but ultimately it should close roughly where we're at right about now. How this fight plays out, Borella for me has to score takedowns here. And she has completed quite a few takedowns in the UFC as well. But for Silva, her last loss against Marina Moroz, that was due to takedowns. She came back in that third round. She could have won that third round 10-8. She could have potentially finished Moroz as well. And then in a debut against Gillian Robertson, she was taken down a couple of times. She did eventually get that submission off her back late in that first round. But ultimately, I do think that Silva can get taken down. So Borella's got to be relentless coming in for takedowns and trying to take her down. Bueno Silva's not too bad on her back though. She did look a little lackluster at times against Moroz, but she was certainly active off her back against Robertson. So Borella has got to mind her P's and Q's on the mat, but ultimately where Borella needs to be successful, she is putting herself in a little bit of danger at the same time. But on the feet, the gap in skill is huge. Silva is a million miles ahead of Borella when it comes to striking. I think if it stays on the feet, Silva will finish her. I think she'll light her up, piece her up and put her away. And ultimately, this is why I'm really favouring Mayra Bueno Silva, because she's got all the advantages on the feet. She can get taken down, but if she gets taken down, then she could be live for a submission as well. I think she's got more paths to victory. I think she's a better fighter than Borella. I think she's absolutely UFC caliber. I'm expecting to see a better Silva this time than what we saw last time out with those developments. I'm picking Mayra Bueno Silva to win this fight. And in the next fight, we've got Jordan Espinosa versus David Dvorak. And as it stands right now, this fight is a straight up pick'em, minus 110 either side. Where the value is on this betting line, I feel that if you've got a good read at either side of this fight, both sides are playable at minus 110. So if you've got that good read, then it's playable for sure. As for where the line moves, we have seen fluctuation again. We've seen Espinosa at minus 115, minus 120. Ultimately, I think that's where the money will come in as we get closer to fight night, just purely because Espinosa has had a few fights in the UFC now. This isn't the debut for Dvorak. He has already had his debut when he fought Bruno Silva, but Espinosa's more experienced inside the octagon. I think that might play a part. I don't think it's going to move too far from where we're at right now. If it closes a pick'em, that wouldn't surprise me either. And as for how this fight plays out, I think it's going to be a really good fight. I think it's going to be a really fun fight. And even though both fighters can wrestle, they can both grind, I do think that we're going to see a stand-up war here. I think the fight is going to be won and lost on the feet. And this is what is edging me to pick Jordan Espinosa, because I feel that although the striking qualities and the power might come from the side of Dvorak. I feel that speed and movement comes from Jordan Espinosa, how he darts in and out of range really quickly. And I feel that the speed and movement will outbeat the power and the technique coming from Dvorak, and also the aggression coming from Dvorak, because if Dvorak's reining forward trying to look to take Jordan Espinosa's head off, I think Espinosa isn't going to be as much as what Dvorak might think. And if Espinosa is constantly moving in and out of range, finding angles, finding exits, resetting back into the centre of the cage as Dvorak is chasing him, it's going to cause frustration on Dvorak's side of things inside the cage. I think Espinosa can use that speed and movement for 15 minutes, or even if he drops the last round, even if he gets tired from doing it so much in round 1 and 2, I think that if he can stay safe and not get finished in that third round, he should win a 29-28 in that scenario. But I'm going for the speed, the movement, the experience of Jordan Espinosa here. I think it could be quite sketchy at times. I think Dvorak is absolutely going to have his moments. But like I say, I think Dvorak won't have been in a cage with somebody that moves like Jordan Espinosa moves. So unless Espinosa gets finished in this fight, I think he should be fine over 3 rounds. I'm picking Jordan Espinosa to win this fight. And in the next fight, we've got Jessica Rose Clark versus Sarah Alpar. Clark is currently sitting as the minus 225 favourite. The comeback on Alpar at plus 185 as the underdog. As for where the value lies in this fight, I think it lies with Sarah Alpar, the debutant. I don't think the line should be this wide at all. I don't think Clark warrants the minus 225 line, which I'll talk about very shortly. So for me, the value is on Alpar at plus 185. As for where the line moves, it wouldn't shock me for more money to actually come in on Jessica Rose Clark. I think Clark is name value. She's got the UFC experience. She's been in there with some good girls. Alpar's the debutant coming from the Contender Series. So for me, it wouldn't shock me to see more money coming in on Clark. But at the same time, if people took that dog shot on Sarah Alpar, then I think that's the right side in this fight for sure. And as for how this fight plays out, in regards to the striking, I think Clark has got a significant striking advantage over Alpar. Alpar can strike. At times she looks quite sloppy though. She also wanes forward a little bit recklessly. Ultimately, I don't think she's terrible striking, but she's definitely green for sure. And because of that, if this fight does stay standing, Clark will win this fight for me all day long. The good news from Sarah Alpar's perspective is that she probably won't have a game plan to come in and strike. She's a wrestler. She's got a wrestling background. She likes to get fights on the mat. And she looks like she has that wrestling base. Her takedowns do look decent. She's a little green in regards to grappling when she gets down there. Her positioning sometimes a little bit off. She's not putting hooks in when she's looking for the rear naked choke straight away, which again, it's just little things that just need ironing out as she's developing. But her wrestling's certainly there. And I think she will score takedowns in this fight. It all depends on how Clark deals with the ground game. Can she get back up? I think she might be able to get back up a couple of times. And a key factor here for me is if Clark starts to really let go of her strikes on the feet and really starts to put it on Alpar, I think that'll force Alpar to start looking at the wrestling more. It'll start forcing takedowns from her, takedowns that I think she'll be able to complete. If she can wear Clark down, I think the grappling, even though it still needs work for sure, I think the grappling could be a big factor for Alpar. If she can get the back of Clark, then she's got every single chance of locking a submission in and getting Clark out of there. I think ultimately we're going to see moments from both women. I think we're going to see moments of Clark striking. I think we're going to see moments of wrestling from Alpar. I think it's going to be a close fight. I'm going to side with the underdog here. I'm picking Sarah Alpar to win this fight. And in the next fight, we've got Randy Costa versus Journey Newson. Journey Newson currently the minus 140 favourite. The comeback on Costa at plus 120 as the underdog. As for where the value is in this betting line, I think that sits with Randy Costa as the underdog. I don't think Journey Newson should be a minus 140 favourite. I get why he is favoured, but personally I would line this much closer to a pick'em if I'm being honest. As for where the line moves, I do think we're going to see some fluctuation. At plus 120, that might attract gamblers to come in and bet on the underdog in Randy Costa, who's the exciting fighter, the guy that's knocking everybody out. But if that betting line does come in too much, I do think we'll see people betting on Journey Newson and pushing him back out to minus 130, minus 140, roughly where he is around now. Ultimately, come Saturday night, I wouldn't be shocked if the lines didn't move much from where they're at today. As for how this fight plays out though, I don't think Randy Costa is as technical as Journey Newson on the feet or on the mat. I don't think he's as well-rounded as Journey Newson. But just like I mentioned last week about Otman Azaitar and Karma Worthy was the more technical striker. He was the guy that was likely more well-rounded. He was the guy that likely had the better cardio. But the problem is with this small cage and these aggressive fighters that come forward, enter the pocket and wing bombs at speed, they have massive advantages. And I see the same thing for Randy Costa. If this fight is fought at a little bit of a slower pace, if Costa's sticking on the outside, then yeah, Journey Newson for me will win this fight. But that's not how Costa fights. He's going to use his small cage to close the distance quickly and to try and be exciting and get Journey Newson out of there. He does definitely have to be careful though, because look at what Journey Newson did against Domingo Pilate last time out. He absolutely flatlined him. So Costa's got to be careful. There's definitely dangers coming back from Journey Newson from a striking perspective. If Newson starts hitting those low kicks as Costa's coming in, that could halt him. That could be a really big weapon for Journey Newson, actually, if he really implements that low kick. But ultimately, once again, just like I said about Azaitar last weekend, Costa's got missiles in his hands, deceptive power. If he touches the chin of his opponents, they're going to go down. And I like that type of aggressive forward pressure fighter with that power in this scenario in the small cage. Looking at what Costa's been doing this camp, he's been with American Top Team, he's been with Mike Brown, he's been with Phil Daru, he's been with Steve Mocco, he's had training partners in Marlon Moraes, Tony Gravely. I think he's had a really good camp. I think it's been a good move for him. I'm expecting to see a better Randy Costa, a more improved Randy Costa. And although Newson is definitely going to be dangerous, he's definitely going to be game, he's definitely going to be up for this fight, he's definitely got a chance of winning this fight, I feel that Randy Costa is going to prevail on the night. I'm picking Randy Costa to win the fight. And in the next fight, we've got Andre Ewell versus Irwin Rivera, who's been busy during lockdown as well. Andre Ewell currently the minus 210 favourite. The comeback on Rivera at plus 175 as the underdog. As for where the value is in this betting line, I do think there's minimal value in Andre Ewell. The line is definitely fair. I can definitely understand why he's sitting at the minus 200, minus 210 range for sure. As for where the line moves, I wouldn't be shocked if it went to minus 225, maybe even minus 230. I do think Andre Ewell poses a lot of stylistic advantages in this fight that I think others might see as well. As for how the fight plays out, I think this plays perfectly for Andre Ewell, if I'm being honest. Andre Ewell is going to be taller, he's going to fight longer, he's definitely going to want to stick at range. A smaller cage, that's more difficult to do, albeit. So the cage size for me definitely favours Rivera, but the speed, the accuracy, the sharpness of the strikes of Ewell, I think it's going to be an absolute nightmare for Rivera. Rivera's going to have to close the distance, get inside, but Ewell's got good lateral movement as well. He can find his way back into the centre of the cage if he gets pinned back a little bit. And like I say, the speed and the sharpness of the strikes, I think he's going to pour on a lot of volume in this fight. Rivera might have some moments, some big action strikes where he lands one big shot and we're thinking, oh, is that going to put Ewell out? But ultimately, I don't think he does put Ewell out. I think the volume is going to be extremely significant. I think the speed advantage is going to be very prominent. I think Ewell is going to look good in this fight. I'm not sure Ewell puts him away. He's not known as a power striker. If he does put people out, it's more accumulation of volume, which again is possible if he puts up the numbers that I think he's going to put up. But ultimately, I think Ewell is just going to shine in this fight. Rivera will probably try and take him down, but Ewell's got decent takedown defense. He's got a decent get-up game as well. I think he's dealt with better wrestlers and better grapplers than Rivera. Ultimately, I think Ewell is going to look great on the night. If he doesn't finish Rivera, I think he's going to score well on the judges' scorecards. So I'm picking Andre Ewell to win this fight. And in the next fight, we've got Darrick Minner versus TJ Laramie. Laramie currently the minus 290 favourite. The comeback on Minner at plus 245. As for where the value is in this fight, I think the betting line's absolutely fair. I still think there's value on Laramie, even though he's moved up from minus 225 to minus 250, and now he's sitting at minus 290. As for where the line moves, I think the line keeps getting wider for Laramie. I think he'll hit the minus 300 range. And I'm just not sure how many people we're going to see rush into that betting window to place a bet on Darrick Minner here, if I'm being honest. So I do think that TJ Laramie is going to close in the region of minus 300 come Saturday night. As for how the fight plays out, early on in this fight, make no mistake about it, Laramie has got to be careful because Minna comes out hard, he fires low kicks, he comes out really fast as well, and he looks to take the fight to the mat. And if he can't, he'll be happy to get taken down to the mat as well. That's where Minna wants this fight, because if he's on top, he can work his wrestling and his top control. He does lay relatively heavy. But if his opponents try and take him down, he likes to wrap up the neck instantly. He's got a really good guillotine, a really strong guillotine. If his opponent pops the head out of that, he'll start throwing up his legs for arm bars, for triangles. He's very, very difficult to deal with. But these difficulties, like I say, they are really in fights between the 2.5 to 4 minute mark. After there, Minna really does start tiring. His gas tank really isn't that great, and fighters can start working their way back into the fight. If the fight's still going by that point, TJ Laramie has got to be careful. There's no question about that. But when you look at these two fighters, I feel that Laramie is the younger fighter, the more developing fighter, improving fight to fight. He's the better striker. He's the fighter that's got better wrestling. I think the jiu-jitsu edge might go to Minna, especially within that first, like I say, 2.5 to 4 minutes. But after then, that jiu-jitsu really wanes, and I think that Laramie will become better. But the biggest advantage here is the cardio. Laramie can go those 3 rounds should he need to. Minna definitely can't. Minna's got that really short window in that first round of getting Laramie out of there, and if he doesn't, then he's going to lose the fight. And I actually think this fight will look a lot similar to the fight that Minna had with Grant Dawson. Minna had moments against Grant Dawson early on in that fight, just like I think he's going to have moments here. But once Minna started tiring, once he realised that he's not going to be able to get Grant Dawson out of there, Grant Dawson started coming back really strong. And I think we're going to see exactly the same thing from Laramie should Minna not get Laramie out of there. The thing is, dropping down for these guillotines and trying to land arm bars and triangles off your back, it can work if you're a high-level Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu specialist, or you've just got something opportunistic and managed to pull it off. Outside of that in the UFC, they're so difficult to score. So I think that Laramie will end up in sticky positions early on in this fight. But if he gets past that 2.5 minute to 4 minute mark, then Laramie is going to turn the tides. If he's not already winning the fight himself, I think he'll be able to take Minna down. I think he'll be able to lay on top of him. Laramie doesn't sit still on top. That's another positive thing. He's not just going to sit in guard and let himself get armbarred. He'll try and advance position whilst dropping ground and pound on his opponent. I think that Laramie's got a bright future in MMA. I really, really do. I think he's a good fighter with a lot of qualities, and he's only going to get better. I think that this fight is a good fight for him stylistically. Like I say, survive that early storm, and then it should be cruise control for TJ Laramie. I'm picking TJ Laramie to win this fight. And in the next fight, we've got Tyson Nam versus Jerome Rivera. Tyson Nam currently the -155 favourite. The comeback on Rivera at +135. As for where the value is in this fight, I think the value is actually on the underdog in Rivera. Now, I know Tyson Nam has got a big record, a lot of experience, huge knockout power, but when his betting line is juiced at minus money, I'm just not totally sold that there's value on Nam at this level in the UFC. As for where the line moves, I think that we are going to see fluctuation. At -155, we could see money coming back in on Nam, pushing him to -165. At that point, I wouldn't be shocked to see money coming back in on the plus money underdog to push that line back down again. I don't think we're going to see the betting line close much further from where we're at right about now come Saturday night. As for how this fight plays out, though, I think that Tyson Nam is definitely going to have advantages in this fight. He's got a striking advantage from a technical perspective. He's got that knockout power as well. And although Rivera is more of a grappler, he does like the fights to be on the mat. I don't feel that he needs to get this fight to the mat to beat Tyson Nam. Although Nam's got the experience, the technical striking advantage, and the knockout power as well, the one part of Nam's game that I really don't like is his volume, his output. It looks very, very low. And whether that's just because he was fighting very quick fighters in Sergio Pettis, Kai Kara France, I'm not too sure. But the volume for me, I haven't seen Tyson Nam pour on a lot of volume. And for a guy that is quite active in Rivera, I feel that even though he's not as technical and he's probably not going to knock Tyson Nam out, I do feel like he could get himself up on numbers in this fight on the feet. But then he's also got that grappling that he can look to as well. Now, Nam isn't the easiest fighter to take down, but I think if Rivera could get him down and get his back, get a body triangle on the back as well, that could keep the fight on the mat for long enough for the referee not to split them up. It'll give Rivera control time. It'll look good in the judge's eyes. I just feel that in this fight, Rivera's got a couple of paths to victory, whereas Nam, for me, I'm not saying he's knockout or bust, but if he doesn't knock him out, the fight is going to be very close. And those two paths that Jerome Rivera has in this fight could end up coming into play. And if they do, then I do favour Rivera to win the fight. I'm picking Jerome Rivera to win this fight. And in the last fight of the breakdown, I'm a little disappointed about this fight, not because of who's in it, but more because of who's not in it. We've got Miguel Baeza versus Jeremiah Wells making his UFC debut. This should have been Miguel Baeza versus Mickey Gall, which I thought was a really fun matchup. Mickey Gall unfortunately pulled out. We've got Miguel Baeza, currently the minus 435 favourite. The comeback on Jeremiah Wells at plus 281 as the underdog. Now, these betting lines aren't everywhere at the minute. This is a pari match betting line, which tends to open most of the UFC lines. We'll see how these lines move a little bit as they start to open across Five Dimes, Sportbet, Bet365, Pinnacle, William Hill, etc. As for where the value is right now, though, I don't think there's a ton of value with Miguel Baeza being such a big favourite. I think Jeremiah Wells does pose some threats that maybe should reflect in a closer betting line, but ultimately, I think they're relatively fair. As for where the line moves, like I say, we'll see what happens when other books open the lines. I could see Miguel Baeza closing minus 350, minus 375. I'd be shocked if this went the other way and hit minus 500, minus 600, if I'm being honest. As for how this fight plays out, I do think Miguel Baeza is going to win here. He's a guy that I think people are really considering as a prospect now. He seems to be solid striking. He seems to have his grappling leveled out as well. He's got power in his hands. He kicks like an absolute mule. Don't take too many of those leg kicks because the fight won't last much longer after those. Against Brown in his last fight was really eye-opening to me. I had a bet on Matt Brown. Matt Brown dropped him. I thought Matt Brown was looking great. But Miguel Baeza not only overcame that adversity against an absolute vet in Matt Brown, but he overcame adversity and then poured that pressure back on Matt Brown, came back in that fight and then finished him. So super impressive performance from Baeza, overcoming adversity and then pushing through that barrier and taking over the fight and finishing the fighter when that fighter is a solid veteran is everything that you need to see out of an up-and-coming prospect. Jeremiah Wells, he's got good trip takedowns. He looks like he's got a heavy top game. He doesn't do too much, but he'll lay there. He'll keep his opponents down. But he comes forward really wild, wings wild shots, so much so that in his last fight, I saw him swinging wild shots so much that he actually fell over because his opponent got out of the way and he lost balance. So Wells has got to really rein that in, but ultimately I think if he comes out here wild against Baeza trying to tie up with him, Baeza's going to kick that leg. He's going to hurt his leg. It's going to halt the movement of Wells. It's going to allow Baeza to take over. And once Baeza starts pouring it on somebody like Wells, I'm not sure how much of that Wells can take and how long it would last after that. So for me, Miguel Baeza is the guy here that is the more skilled striker, is the fighter that is probably going to be able to nullify the strengths of his opponent and keep the fight vertical. I'm picking Miguel Baeza to win this fight. And that's all for this episode of On the Moneyline. I hope you all enjoyed it, and once again, guys, I'd appreciate all likes to the video and subscriptions to our MMAPlay365 YouTube channel too. Remember, you can get all the betting advice you'll ever need over at MMAPlay365.com. We cater for long-term gamblers that like to build their own bets and strategies, gamblers that just want to follow exactly what I bet on, and we also cater for you fun gamblers that like the long shot fun parlays, or ACCAs as we call them in the UK, and we also support the DraftKings and FanDuel players with our daily fantasy sports content too, which comes with our very own private chat room so you can chat to our expert throughout every fight week. We have plenty of different packages and subscription options for you guys to choose from, and they're all at very affordable prices too. Just hop on to MMAPlay365.com and see what's best for you. Thank you all for listening, and we'll see you at the next event.